Oh Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parirajacharya Ashtatar Satashish Divine Grace Abhaichana Arvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai Jai Nithai Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 15, Description of the Kingdom of God. Text number 30. Tanvikshya vata rasanams chatura kumaran Vriddhan dasarda vayaso vididatma tattvan Vetrena chaskalayatam atad arhanam stau Tejo vihasya bhagavat pratikula silo Tanvikshya vatarasanam chatura kumaran Vriddhan dasarda vayaso viditatma tattvan Vetrena chaskalayatam atad arhanam stau Tejo vihasya bhagavat pratikula silo Tanvikshya vatarasanam chatura kumaran Vriddhan dasarda vayaso viditatma tattvan Vetrena chaskalayatam atad arhanam stau Tejo vihasya bhagavat pratikula silo Pratikula silo Vikshvata rasadam chatura kumaran Tejo vihasya bhagavat pratikula silo Mataji's. Shavata rasa Vayaso viditatma tattvan Vetrena chaskalayatam atad arhanam stau Teja vihasya bhagavat patikula silo Tan vikshavrata rasadam chatura kumaran Vitet chata vasayo viditatma tastam Tejo vihasya bhagavat patikula silo Word for word, tan, them, vikshya, after seeing, vatarasanan, naked, chaturaha, four, kumaran, boys, vriddhan, aged, dasa ardha, 5 years, Vayasaha, appearing as of the age. Vidita, had realized. Atma Tattvan, the truth of the self. Vetrena, with their staffs. Cha, also. Askalayatam, forbade. Atat arhanan, not deserving such from them. Tau, those two porters. Tejaha, glories. Vihasya, disregarding the etiquette. Bhagavat pratikula shilo, having a nature displeasing to the Lord. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the 4 boy sages who had nothing to cover their bodies but the atmosphere looked only 5 years old, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. But when the porters, who happened to possess a disposition quite unpalatable to the Lord, saw the sages, they blocked their way with their staffs, despising their glories, although the sages did not deserve such treatment at their hands. Purport: the 4 sages were the first-born sons of Brahma. Therefore, all other living entities, including Lord Shiva, are born later and are therefore younger than the 4 Kumaras. Although they looked like 5-year-old boys and traveled naked, the Kumaras were older than all other living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. Such saints were not to be forbidden to enter the kingdom of Vaikuntha. but by chance the doormen objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras, but in spite of knowing this fact, the doormen astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. Om Jnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Mukham karati vachalam bhangam langayati girim yat kripa tabaham vande Shri Gurun Devanam. Hare Krishna. So we're continuing our discussion on what the four Kumaras felt upon being denied entrance into Vaikuntha. It's a little of a short purport and it's more of an informative purport. So I'll quickly touch upon this and then we'll continue to the next verse. But in this particular verse we are seeing a very interesting sort of scene, and it's being explained by Lord Brahma in such a way that it appears that Jay and Vijay have become sort of offensive or non-devotee-like. In Vaikuntha, it's mentioned that everyone is a servant of the Lord. So there's no such room for seeing anyone separately from that sort of notion. So their whole focus is in worshipping Lord Vishnu or Narayan, and their mood is of the dasyaras. And naturally the mood between devotees in the spiritual world is that they always see them in relation to Krishna or relation to Narayan. So their mood will always be of a humble nature, of gratitude. And they will also have that competitive nature of service. That person is doing better than me, so how wonderful that person is doing. It pleases Krishna, pleases Narayan so much. Let me do more. Let me do something so that I can match them or defeat them. In that way I can give pleasure to Narayan, and in that way we can have some transcendental competition in such a way that we can increase the pleasure of Lord Narayan. But we see here that when the sages, having been qualified to enter at least 6 gates of Vaikuntha, to enter into the 7th gate. Now to give you an understanding, touching upon what Rasananda Prabhu was mentioning, Gopi Paranandana Prabhu was mentioning also in a class, that in Vaikuntha there are 7 gates, and there are 4 entry points into Vaikuntha. Okay, so it's kind of like from our perspective of north, south, east, west. And each entry point has 7 gates. So in total there are 28 gates into Vaikuntha. And each gate has 2 doorkeepers. So there are 56 doorkeepers there in Vaikuntha. And of the 56, it happened to be, I guess, Jay and Vijay's bad day, unlucky day. Of the 56, they happened to be chosen to meet the 4 Kumaras. So, as Prabhu was mentioning also, you see the temples, especially like Tirupati and Sri Rangam, how they've arranged in such a way. Like for our temple, there's practically, if you want to put it, 3 gates until we see Radha Gopinath, you know. There's the front door, there's the temple room door, and then we have the grill gate here. There are 3 gates. We're very fortunate. Gopinath knows how lazy we are. And there's no doorman, so there's no question of difficulty in seeing Radha Gopinath. But in the traditional temples of South India, you'll see that they are separated by gates, entry points. And within each of these entry points, or within the gates, there are, I guess, vicinities for marketplaces, vicinities for food stalls, places where they may sell items, people may live people who live in the temple, the priests, they may live there, or there may be shrines and other functions until you get to the center or the interior, which is the last gate. And that last gate is like the inner sanctum, or they say the Garbhagriha, the inner sanctum where the Lord actually resides. Now, that's akin to what the four Kumaras were coming to. They're coming to the inner private section of Lord Narayan within Vaikuntha. This is how Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was explaining in the class. So you can understand how far the four Kumaras, although the Acharyas say that the four Kumaras, they just went to the border of Vaikuntha, but you can see what border they're talking about. Is they actually went past 6 gates. And it's not just, one gate, then another gate, then another gate. There's actually things that happen in between, like gardens, residential places. So within the palace, or within the area or the interior, or where Lord Narayan resides with Lakshmi, Mahalakshmi, in there'll be the more intimate pastimes, the direct pastimes with the Lord. And Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was mentioning that in the other sections they also worship the Lord, but they'll worship the Lord in a way of service to the Lord. No, that's not the same as what's inside. It's more variegated. So they'll be performing their pastimes like flying in airplanes, glorifying the Lord. They'll perform different activities such as marketplaces, all of those sort of basic things. Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was explaining in this way. So you can understand that it's like a little insight into Vaikuntha. It's not just door after door after door, but rather there are things that are happening in between. Now coming to the point of Jay and Vijay's mood. I remember, it's actually in this class Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was mentioning, there was a little girl that was asking a question to him. And she was asking him that, why did Jay and Vijay act like this? And then he was saying, he began by explaining, they offended Lakshmi and they had a bit of a problem and that sort of thing. And then she was like, why? So then he explained that actually they were having a bad day, they were holding it in, and then and then the four Kumaras came and they just kind of, let go. They couldn't hold anymore. And so the kid was asking why. So she kept asking like that. And Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was just breaking it down. And then he finally said that, they were having a really bad day and they offended a devotee of the Lord. So this is what happened. Jay and Vijay ordinarily wouldn't have lost their intelligence in that way. So this is an example of where what had happened, Acharyas mentioned in the past, that Jay and Vijay, they had heard the Virya Ras of the Lord. They heard pastimes of the Lord in chivalry, where he was fighting the demons. And naturally within their heart, they desired to see such pastimes. In fact, became so intense, they wanted to participate in such pastimes. And the Lord took note of that. Because you see, actually I was going through all the different classes in this verse, because I was thinking, what should I speak on? I don't even, it's very, very, a lot of topics to talk about. But all of them talked about this point of rasabhas. And of course, I'm not qualified to talk about the mellows of devotional service. I still don't know if I'm of the body or the soul. But in repeating what the great acharyas, great personalities like Bhakti Chara Maharaj, Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu, Pralandan Maharaj, they were mentioning on this verse, is that once they develop that desire to experience Virras or to share that ras with the Lord, in Vaikuntha it's only Dasya Ras. Only Lakshmi enjoys conjugal love with Narayan, and that's Mahalakshmi, not the others, not the other jivas that appear to be like Lakshmi. Only Mahalakshmi, the internal potency of the Lord, and the Lord himself, they share that Madhurya Ras. Everyone else is of Dasya. And that Dasya is called of Gauravena, which means it's primarily predominated by awe and reverence. So you won't see the residents of Narayan jumping on Narayan's back. You won't see that sort of very friendly relationship happening, that intimate association. That Vishramba Sakya, that type of friendliness or devotional service and friendship, that's prevalent in Goloka Vrindavan. So this type of friendship with the Lord, having this desire to have viryaras, or fighting the Lord, or seeing his pastimes, it causes what's known as rasabhas, or a mixture of inappropriate mellows of service. And that becomes very, very pratikul, or very unfavorable in devotional service. Like, for example, we don't want to go to that the extreme extent is kind of like how Kamsa saw the Lord. But it was completely unfavorable because it was in the mood of fear. And it wasn't in the mood of favorable devotional service and seeing the Lord as a friend, as one's master. Rather, he just saw him as death and was scared of him. So you can see that's a very incompatible mix of emotions, which is why he was a demon. Right? And the reason why devotees are devotees is because they know what the compatible mixes of emotional or devotional service is to the Lord. They know how to further enhance the relationship with the Lord. Now, because of that mixing or that desire of Virya-ras along with Dasya-ras, the Lord had to arrange a situation to sort of iron things out. So what happened later, Acharyas mentioned, is that one particular point Narayan was taking rest. Always takes rest, apparently. He was doing some personal, private matters, and he had told Jay and Vijay that you please don't let anyone in unless I ask you to. So in Jay and Vijay, they stood in the doorway. At that time, Lakshmi Devi came. And when Lakshmi Devi came, she wanted entrance into the inner sanctum where Narayan was resting. And the doorkeepers, Jay and Vijay, said, no. Our Lord has said like this, we can't let you in. And it's mentioned that Lakshmi Devi, she didn't really take offense because she understood the situation, but still she felt a bit hurt within. Some instances mention how she actually cursed them. Some instances mention that what happened later on was that the four Kumaras, rather Jay and Vijay, they were at the doorway, and unfortunately at that point in time, that particular Vaishnava Parad came upon them, the reaction of the Vaishnava Parad, so that they became disturbed in mind. It's a very difficult concept to understand because in the material world we're constantly disturbed. Right? There's that verse, Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavati akinchana sarve gunash tatra samasate suraha harava bhaktasya kuto mahadguna manoratena asato davito bahi. The devotees, they possess all the good qualities of the demigods. Whereas the demons, or rather the non-devotees, although they may look like they possess the quality, it's just superficial. It's just a small, thin, superficial layer that can be broken within a moment. Why? Because they're riding on the chariot of the mind. Manoratena asato davito bahi. And it's always moving here and there. One day they'll be like this, the next day they'll flip, because they're just going with what the mind does. The mind just simply accepts and rejects very frivolously. So, you can see we're constantly disturbed. If we're not able to maintain a certain consciousness and we're flickering back and forth, we can understand how disturbed we are. But the devotees of the Lord, they're always conscious of the Lord. They're always conscious of the devotional service they have to render to the Lord, and they're always conscious of what the Lord wants to please Him. But when you're disturbed in consciousness, vavasayatmika buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushakasyanantascha buddhayo avavasayanam. Right? So the Lord says that when one is fixed in intelligence, in service to Him, then they're able to perform devotional service. Later on, after that, 2-3 verses later, He says that Bhogashvarya prasaktanam taya parhata chetasam vavasayatmaka buddhi samadona vidiyate. That one who's attached to material opulences and the material pleasures, their resolute determination for performing devotional service to the Lord does not take place. Why? Because they're distracted, many branched. Have you noticed that? Sometimes if you have many things to do in the day, if you're not fixed in consciousness, you'll complete like 50% of one, and then suddenly you'll jump to another task, and then another task, and another task. And at the end of the day, you'll think, what did I actually achieve? Nothing has been achieved. It's like that. When you're serving the Lord and you're constantly interrupted, it is natural you'll feel the distress of material nature. It is natural because you're not completely absorbed in the service of the Lord. If you're not absorbed in the service of the Lord, the only other option is absorption in the service of Maya. And if you're absorbed in the service of Maya, the rasa there is completely of an inimical nature. It is completely incompatible in worship of the Lord. So naturally the Lord has to impose certain situations or restrictions to help us again come back to our normal health, to be able to serve Him in the proper mood, proper relationship. So these four boy sages, Prabhupada says here, the four Kumaras, although they were considered to be such prime living entities in the universe, direct sons of Lord Brahma, before even Lord Shiva, before even Swayambhuv Manu, who began the whole propagation of existence of all population, they're considered to be of that stature, that caliber. These two doorkeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, they lost their intelligence due to Vaishnava Parad. And as Prabhu has been mentioning regularly, that our devotional service is like a little creeper. And it's very, very weak. And we must constantly protect it by weeding out all the weeds and making a fence so that we don't offend devotees. In other words, we don't let animals come and eat the creeper and stunt its growth. Why is that emphasis made? Because you can see here that even if you enter into the highest levels of devotional service like bhava and prema, if you perform Vaishnava Parad, there's only one way down. It's a very, very, very serious offense. There's an example given by the acharyas of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, specifically of Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami. One day Rupa Goswami was sitting under a tree and chanting his japa. And while he was chanting his japa, he naturally had attained a situation where he was able to enter into the pastimes of the Lord. And he was able to experience what the Lord was performing in terms of his specific pastimes. And on this particular day, it so happened that the Lord was performing his taxing pastimes, wherein the gopis would pass through a particular section of Vrindavan. And then the gopas headed by Krishna would stop her and her maid and her friends and demand a tax, saying that, I'm the king's son, I'm Nanda Maharaj's son. You can't pass this point without paying some tax. Because you're holding so many goods, you think you can benefit from selling them. The king of Vraja is the one who actually benefits, so you should pay some tax. And naturally, in this sort of mood, humor, Rupa Goswami felt happiness. He saw the comedic nature of such pastimes, so he started to laugh. At that particular time, one devotee was passing that area, and he was a bit lame. He had some problems with walking, disabled. And when he was walking by, Rupa Goswami happened to laugh, not at him, but at his internal meditation of the pastimes of the Lord. And unfortunately, this Vaishnava took offense. He thought, he's laughing at me at the way I walk because of my disability. So, being disappointed in that way, he left the situation. He left that area. He just disappeared. And it's mentioned that Rupa Goswami, within moments, his meditation broke just like that. He became disturbed. He was no longer able to serve the Lord in such a way and engage in the pastimes of the Lord for the Lord's pleasure. It became interrupted. And that caused great disappointment and dissatisfaction at heart. So then he was thinking, how did this happen? What happened? And so he consulted his brother Sanatana Goswami. And Sanatana Goswami told him that you may have accidentally offended someone. And he said, how would I know who I've offended? I've met so many people, I've acted in appropriate etiquette, how will I know? He said, in the area, you should feed everyone. Arrange a feast to feed everyone. If someone doesn't come, then you know. That's the person you've offended. So then, eventually he found out that disabled Vaishnava. And he went and begged forgiveness and explained the situation. And that Vaishnava forgave him, and naturally the situation was solved. Now, Rupa Goswami is not of a neophyte nature like us. Right? He's a direct servant of Lalita Shaki. And he's a Nitya Siddha. He's a pure devotee of the Lord. But this pastime has been enacted to teach us that even though you may be in such high realms of devotional service, if you offend a Vaishnava, a fellow devotee, and disturb their consciousness, then devotional service will be stunted. Your progress, your relationship with the Lord will be disturbed. So therefore, Mahaprabhu is mentioned, Hati Mata. It is an elephant that will destroy. An elephant, when it goes through a forest, it will decimate, it will destroy everything in madness. It won't leave anything unturned. It becomes such an inimical creature. Like that, if we perform Vaishnava Parad, then our creeper will be completely destroyed. unless and until we atone by begging forgiveness from the Vaishnavas we've offended, or Vaishnava we've offended, our Bhakti Lata Kripa will be stunted. We'll not be able to progress gradually in devotional service, because we'll be disturbed in heart. And when we're disturbed in heart, Sukadev Goswami mentions in 2nd canto of Bhagavatam, that when one hears the glories of the Lord but does not cry in ecstasy, one does not feel hair standing on end, then it is to be confirmed that such a person's heart is steel-framed. Very hard-hearted person. Right? We're on the progress of breaking this hard heart and making it soft. Like the Acharyas mention, that Krishna loves to steal soft butter. Therefore, in the devotee's heart, they're so soft that the Lord is attracted to enter their hearts and steal the butter, like emotional or the devotional service of the devotees, or the devotion of the devotees. So our heart should become very soft. But where is the hope if we're constantly disturbed, if we're constantly disturbing others or performing Vaishnava Parad? So you can see here that Jay and Vijay, such a situation happened. And because of this mixing of rasas that caused incompatible nature and caused disturbance in the heart, they offended the 4 Kumaras. But we have to also see here that it was in one sense enacted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He had arranged the situation. But we should always remember that it's not that the Lord controlled Jay and Vijay in such a way to put them down. It is that the Lord is reciprocating with Jay and Vijay's desire, because He's naturally obliged to His servants, right? Because they're simply engaged wholeheartedly in Narayan's service. They don't know anything else. But the Lord is obliged to them for their service. So naturally He wants to satisfy them. But Jay and Vijay, what was their consciousness? That it would be nice for us to engage in this rasa so the Lord will be able to enjoy this chivalrous nature. Their motive wasn't that, it would be nice to go and, exchange a bit of arrows with the Lord, This Dasya rasa is getting a bit boring. It wasn't like that. It wasn't self-centered. It was completely centered around Krishna's pleasure. So the Lord had arranged the situation. So therefore what you'll see is that the Lord will personally come out of the interior section of His palace, and He'll come straight to the door. Right? From our understanding of mundane monarchy and, of the hierarchy that happens in this world, the person in charge doesn't bother coming out. They have an intercom at worst. If they don't have servants, they'll have an intercom system. You'll knock and you say hello, and you say, who is it? What do you want? What do you have there? I don't want anything. Right? So they don't bother coming out. But you see here, Lord Narayan is coming out of His own way. He's coming out. To the extent that He actually converses with the sages and begs pardon on behalf of Jay and Vijay. Right? And He's setting up the situation. Although the emotions seem to be incompatible, He's stirring it up as Rasaraj, as the king of all mellows. He's setting up the situation in such a way that everyone benefits from it. The 4 sages learn the glories of the devotees in Vaikuntha. They understand their situation, how they've come from, Brahmavad to finally devotional service. The 2 gatekeepers get their wish satisfied, to be able to engage in the service of the Lord. And Narayan is satisfied, his desires are satisfied all the time. Atma Kama, Atma Rama. He's able to teach the 4 Kumaras, He's able to teach all living entities that read Srimad Bhagavatam, He's able to satisfy His devotees, He's able to pacify Lakshmi Devi, He's able to even enjoy what seems to be a negative situation, right? That suddenly if someone goes out, a manager's employee does something, then the manager has to come and apologize on behalf to the customer, saying, sorry, this person did that, did this. And it seems like a completely negative situation, No one benefits from it. But here, Krishna is so perfect, He's able to benefit the situation, benefit everyone from the situation. So, that was a small thing about Rasa Bas, and the things I was hearing from in those classes. Another point to be mentioned here is that it appears here that, This is in the translation, but the porters who happened to possess a disposition quite unpalatable to the Lord, they saw the sages, they blocked their way with their staffs, despising their glories, although the sages did not deserve such treatment at their hands. So coming back to the point of Vaishnava Rad, I've kind of painted sort of a negative picture, a very heavy, depressive picture so far. But the best way to avoid Vaishnava Rad is just simply to follow the instructions of Sri Radha Gopinath coming through Srila Prabhupada. And that is that we perform or render devotional service in the mood that all the other Vaishnavas are our masters, they are our Prabhu. If we remember that, then we won't fall into the trap of complacency or familiarity. We won't become overly close to the Vaishnavas. And it makes it sound like, if you don't become overly close, how can you develop a relationship, How can you be close with a Vaishnava? But actually, the material understanding of closeness or intimacy is based on physical connection, if not an emotional connection. So it's on a physical and subtle platform. It's not on a spiritual platform. It's not soul-to-soul connection. So therefore, it'll constantly be lacking. There'll always be a hole in such a relationship. And such skin disease will take one further away from Krishna's service. But actually the real way of associating is to see the other person in relationship with Krishna. Our relationship with one another is in relationship with Krishna. We understand another devotee's association, another devotee's value of their association in relationship to Krishna. How? Prabhupada explains that in the nature of transcendental competition, as mentioned before, that the living entities, or us, the devotees specifically, they will see other devotees and they will see what such wonderful service they're performing. But I will better it for the pleasure of Radha Gopinath. So that is the mood of a devotee. That yes, they're my master, yes, they're performing wonderful service, but I will outdo their service. And it's mentioned in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada mentions that the acharyas become pleased. The previous acharyas become extremely pleased when they see that their disciples outperform them in devotional service. Because that gives them so much great bliss. Because what is their mood? Their mood is we want to engage all living entities in the service of Shri Radha Gopinath for their pleasure. And if I'm able to bring one soul closer to Krishna, that gives him so much pleasure, what great success. They'll get so much pleasure from it. But what do we think? We think that, oh no, my position is being rivaled now. My Guru Maharaj mentions that when he first read the books, he thought two very interesting things. That when you offer prasadam or offer bhoga to the Lord, the remnants you take is you tip out the pot and take whatever's left in the bottom of the pot. They are the remnants, right? And the second thing he was mentioning was that in Vaikuntha, or the spiritual world, it seems such a great place. I should hurry up and get there very quickly before the spaces, there's no more spaces left, right? And he was mentioning that these misconceptions came about because of a lack of association with devotees. But yeah, so you can understand that because of a lack of understanding of devotional service, due to ignorance, avidya, we make mistakes. Innocently, not so innocently. All of those things are there. But if we continuously surround ourselves in the association of devotees, naturally we'll be protected. Because we'll learn how to associate with them. I was listening to a lecture by Radhashyam Prabhu, and he was quoting Sridhar Maharaj, one of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And he was saying, when I came to devotional service, I wanted to know what my life was about. So I understood there was God, I understood there was Krishna, and that you should worship Krishna and serve Him. But then I realized how difficult it is to directly do it. So therefore I understood that I have to serve the devotees. But then when I understood that I have to serve the devotees, the Vaishnavas, to be able to get Krishna Prem, then I realized that I need to develop the qualities of a Vaishnava to properly associate with them. So here Radhashyam Prabhu was mentioning, quoting this example, saying that if we develop these 26 qualities, it'll be very easy for us to associate with devotees. Because if you have a look at the qualities of the devotees, the 26 mentioned by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, it covers pretty much everything. The basics of humility is there. Complete surrender to the Lord is there. Expertise in devotional service, being a poet, eating very minimally just to keep the body and soul together. All of these qualities are of a spiritual nature. So naturally, if we develop those such qualities, we'll be able to associate with the devotees more and more. And associating devotees doesn't simply mean, rubbing shoulders with them. Of course, it's mentioned that Ambarish Maharaj, he was able to associate with the devotees by rubbing shoulders with them in kirtan. But it doesn't mean such superficial relationship. It means that we engage in service with the common cause, and that is to serve Srila Prabhupada in serving Mahaprabhu's movement. If we have that one common cause, naturally, in association, devotees will be able to reconcile everything. And naturally, we'll be able to overcome this sense of Vaishnava Aparad. Because Vaishnava Aparad comes when we have this disturbance, this clash. And Kali Yuga, congratulations everyone, you're welcome to Kali Yuga. This is an age of quarrel and hypocrisy. So it's natural there will be constant quarreling. But Prabhupada says when one comes to devotional service, it appears like it's normal quarreling. But actually one devotee is trying to say that maybe Krishna, Gopinath, he wants it like this. And another devotee is thinking, no, we should do it this way, it will be pleasing to Krishna that way. So it appears to be quarreling, but the common cause is still there for Krishna's service. So then they reconcile. One will compromise, and the other one will go ahead with their plan. Or vice versa in another situation. So if we have that common cause in mind, then naturally we won't become over familiar with devotees, and naturally we won't commit Vaishnava Aparad. But it still seems to be such a negative thing, because sometimes we feel as sincere devotees that we'll fall here and there, slip and trip. A couple of bad words will come out of the mouth, out of anger, out of frustration. But here's something that I remember listening to when I first came to Krishna consciousness, and it kind of stuck for a period of time until I forgot, conditioned soul. But I was recently remembering it again. I remember I was hearing a lecture, I forgot who it was by. I think it was either Shrutikirti Prabhu or another Maharaj. And he was mentioning there that when Prabhupada's disciples in the early days, if they had, caused some discomfort, they had, argued and had got into a quarrel with a devotee, they would immediately pay obeisances to each other and chant Prabhupada's pranam mantra. And then they would immediately bring them back to the common cause. Immediately bring them back. That actually, you're Prabhupada's servant, I'm meant to be serving you. And that was their consciousness. So in the same way we can have that consciousness. Another technique, another method practically we can follow is gratitude. If we maintain a mood of gratitude, we won't commit offenses. Because we'll naturally understand our difficult position and how by the mercy of the others we've come to Krishna consciousness. It's a very narrow-minded perception that we came to Krishna consciousness only because of our own endeavors, only because of Krishna, Krishna directly guided me, or that only one devotee helped me out. Rather, it is because of the association of all the devotees that we are progressing in devotional service. And we should be grateful for that. If you go even deeper into the, into devotional service or into the mellows of devotional service, you'll understand one simple point. We're all servants of Radha Gopinath. And each one of us have a position in the spiritual world that cannot be taken over by another living entity. That's what it means to be individual. What that means is that each one of you can serve Krishna in a way that I can never serve Krishna. Which means you can relate to Krishna in such a way that only you two can enjoy that rasa. Of course, Krishna is full of rasa. If you choose not to show that rasa with him, he can enjoy himself. He does not need us. But still, out of his causeless mercy, he's allowing us to render some service unto him. And he's enjoying such mellows. But the point I'm trying to make is that unless we have the association of the devotee, and that means, I'll take a step back, and that means that the devotee other than you will be able to perceive Krishna's opulence, his glories, his pastimes in a way that you won't be able to perceive. You won't be able to appreciate Gopinath in that way. that perspective of Gopinath unless you associate with that devotee, unless you engage in Krishna Katha with that devotee or service with that devotee. And we would have all experienced it. Sometimes we'll come and sit for Bhagavatam class and you see a speaker and you may not recognize them, but then if you sit down for the rest of the class, you realize that, hey, actually, yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's amazing, you know. And we see that in reading Prabhupada's books also. We develop newer and fresher realizations. And sometimes Prabhupada's humor, Prabhupada's wit, Prabhupada's chastisement, in many, many different ways, we're able to perceive how Prabhupada is able to perceive Shri Radha Gopinath. And it's not just Prabhupada. Prabhupada's taking the essence of the previous acharyas and giving it to us as well. So we're getting a bit of their moods as well. So it's a very great fortune to be able to associate with devotees. So we need to understand the glories of devotees. That's another technique as well. You're grateful to the devotees. You understand their glories. And also you render service to them in the proper state of mind, with a common cause. If you try and endeavor, you'll find many, many ways to be connected with devotees. But naturally, the easiest method is always to remain grateful, from my personal perspective. If you're grateful for what you have, you're very careful to protect and maintain it. It's a very common or natural instinct. And because of forgetfulness, because of all of these difficulties we experience in Krishna consciousness, we'll be able to come back on track if we're in association with devotees. So it seems like it's a difficult situation, you know, I'm offending devotees, but I need the association of devotees. But it just means that we need to develop the right mood and consciousness, the right understanding. And naturally we'll come back and we will be able to avoid this Vaishnava aparat. And as you'll see here, the four Kumaras and Jay and Vijay, by the help of the Lord, will rectify the situation. They'll both, you know, understand. Oh, the sages will think, oh, you know, we unnecessarily out of anger criticize these devotees. And Jay and Vijay will think, oh, you know, unnecessarily out of envy we prevented from Jay and Vijay from coming. And naturally the Lord pacified this, or settled the situation because of the sincerity of both parties. So if you ever find yourself in a situation, you can have faith that the Lord, you can pray to Mahaprabhu actually. That, you know, Mahaprabhu, I don't know who I've offended, if I have offended anyone. Please help me arrange a situation where I can serve them. Mahaprabhu will help. You can't ask Mahaprabhu, please, you know, eradicate, you know, the natural atonement, you know. Oh, you know, I've done this act, you know, you come and confess, okay, I'm pure now, and you go out and do it again. But rather you can worship and pray Shri Chaitanya to Mahaprabhu that please, you know, I may have done something. If I have, please arrange a situation. Give me the intelligence to be able to rectify the situation. And in that way Mahaprabhu will help. So there are some practical tips for that sort of aspect of this verse. I'll end here. I'll take a few questions. It's mentioned in the Vaikuntha planets, primarily it's Dasya. Sakya of the nature of Vishramba, or that of intimacy, where, you know, the Gopas, like for example, think they're equal to Krishna. Krishna is just one of us. That's prevalent in Vrindavan Dham. And Goloka Vrindavan, as Rasananda Prabhu is mentioning, is made of Goloka Navadvip and Goloka Vrindavan. So they exist there. Whereas the other rasas, so the other rasas below that Sakya ras exist in the Vaikuntha planets. So in Ram Lila you see that predominantly Dasya ras will be there. In Dwarka, Dasya ras will be there. Except for the internal potency of the Lord and His contact with the internal potency, which is of Madhurya ras, all other living entities will engage in Dasya ras. Or of, if it comes to it, the Sakya ras of the known as Gauravena, or that which is of awe and reverence. For example, someone like Uddhava had a mix of that. That Sakya ras would be there, but predominantly Dasya ras. Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise they wouldn't have bothered coming to Vaikuntha.
Is Lord Narayana the predominant deity of all the Vaikuntha planets?
Yes. So in all, Mahaprabhu mentions that, there's, according to the way Narayan holds the weapons, he's given a different name and he has a different planet. So then you have the other avatars of the Lord, such as Varahadev, Nrsingadev, they also have planets there as well. They're also Narayan.
It's just the four instruments that are actually interchanged.
Yeah, when they interchange the different name of the Lord. You can read that in, I think, Sanatana Siksha. Chaitanya Charitamrita.
You talked about Vaishnava Bharat. So if we actually take the instance of Durvasa Mahamuni, after he traveled throughout the various planets, I guess he was actually told to get the pardon of Ambarish Maharaj. Does it also mean that the Lord actually excused him? I heard that in spite of a devotee getting excused by the Vaishnava, the Lord doesn't forget. So in Ambarish Maharaj's case, can we say that Durvasa Mahamuni was excused by the Lord himself?
Actually, it's mentioned that one thing is that Durvasa Muni, it's mentioned by the Acharyas that he got a special visa to enter into Vaikuntha. So he wasn't really qualified to enter Vaikuntha, but the Lord had arranged such a situation. But to answer your question, the fact that Ambarish Maharaj stopped Sudarshan Chakra, and it's mentioned Sudarshan Chakra is the sight of the Lord, if I'm not mistaken. He's in connection with the Lord directly. It's mentioned that in Dwarka, what had happened was after Krishna had killed the king of Kasi, his son Sudakshana had performed a yagya of black arts, and he had sent a demon. A demon came from the fire, and he sent the demon to go and kill Krishna in Dwarka. And at that time, Krishna was just playing chess, right? He was just enjoying chess with his wives. And all the residents came running, that Krishna, Govinda, Narayana, Vishnu, please save us. There's some demon coming. And it's mentioned that Krishna just smiled, and he dispatched Sudarshan Chakra. Many times it's mentioned Sudarshan Chakra doesn't even wait. He just immediately goes, because he knows exactly what the Lord's motive is. So in that sense, he's one with the Lord in the same cause, in the same mood. So the fact that Ambarish Maharaj forgave Durvasa Muni, the Lord was obliged to follow Ambarish Maharaj. Does that make sense? The fact that Ambarish Maharaj forgave Durvasa Muni and stopped Sudarshan Chakra, the Lord couldn't do anything. Because he is subordinate to Ambarish Maharaj's. But in the case of, I think, as you mentioned, that the Lord doesn't forget, that's I remember specifically mentioned by Prabhupada when Kurukshetra happened, that Draupadi was offended, the Pandavas were offended, so therefore the Lord wasn't willing to spare anyone on the battlefield, because none of them had made any endeavor to rectify the situation, right? So then, finished. Okay?
Just one last thing. Brahmavadis and Mayavadis, can we also say that they have realized the truth of the self?
Not quite. Because real understanding of the self, Prabhupada says, is that knowing oneself, knowing the super self, Krishna, and knowing one's relationship with him. That is real self-realization. It's mentioned so many places in Bhagavad Gita. But the Brahmavadis and Mayavadis, they're not fully conversant of the absolute truth. So they don't really have full Atma Tattva. They're incomplete still. Hare Krishna. Any other questions? Yes.
So, all commands being Brahmavadis, they're not self-realized, so, and then God realization comes later. How did they make it to the, like, I mean, they didn't go to the Vatican, it's only a separate day.
Mm-hmm.
They get to meet Vishnu. How is that possible?
Rasananda Prabhu mentioned in the previous class that actually these 4 Kumaras, they got the mercy of the Lord by smelling the tulsi that was offered to his lotus feet. That caused a change of consciousness which allowed them the qualification to go to Vaikuntha. Yeah. So I'll end here. We're quite over time. Thank you very much for listening. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande.